Today on Face the Nation, what a week. An election shakes the Democrats, a tragedy at Fort Hood, then last night,
the bill is passed.
The House passed a health care bill. We'll get the latest on all of it as we talk with the chairman of the House Armed Services Committee, Ike Skelton. Two key senators on defense issues, Republican Lindsey Graham and Democrat Jack Reed, will also play key roles when the health reform bill gets to the Senate. Then we'll bring in Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz, Democrat of Florida, and Republican political consultant Ed Rollins to talk about the impact of Tuesday's elections on both parties and the health care debate. I'll have a word then on jumping to conclusions about Fort Hood, and I've jumped. But first, catching up on the week that was on Face the Nation.
Face the Nation with CBS News Chief Washington Correspondent Bob Schieffer. And now from CBS News in Washington, Bob Schieffer.
And good morning again. Chairman Skelton is here in the studio with us this morning. Our two guests from the Senate, Lindsey Graham and Jack Reed, are in their home states of South Carolina and Rhode Island. Let me start with these senators first because I want to get your take, Senator Reed and Senator Graham, on the health care bill that the House passed last night. Do you think at this point, Senator Reed, that there are the votes in the Senate to pass the bill that the House passed, because it does include the so-called public option, this government health care insurance program that would be run by the government? You think that's going to pass the Senate?
I believe we're going to pass health care reform. I believe we must do this because it's essential to not just the quality of life here, but our economic success in the future. Senator Reed, Harry Reid, has introduced a public option. There's strong support there. But we are far from the end of the debate in the Senate. It'll take time. It'll be careful, thorough, and deliberate. I hope that a public option is part of the final bill.
But candidly, right now, you don't have the votes in the Senate for that. Am I not correct in saying that?
I think there's a discussion about, as Senator Snowe suggested, a trigger to the public option. Senator Reid has suggested a opt-out by the states. There is a debate, or an active debate, about how the public option might come about. But overwhelmingly, 60% of the American public want a public option, and I think we should be listening to them as much as listening to ourselves.
Well, let's get the take from Senator Graham. Senator Graham, your friend, the independent Democrat Joe Lieberman, on this broadcast last Sunday said no health care reform legislation is better than health care reform with the public option. Where do you think this is going in the Senate?
Well, let's start with the House bill. The House bill is dead on arrival in the Senate. Just look at how it passed. It passed 220 to 215. It passed by 2 votes. You had 39 Democrats vote against the bill. They come from red states, moderate Democrats from swing districts. They bailed out on this bill. It was a bill written by liberals for liberals, and people like Joe Lieberman are not going to get anywhere near the House bill. It cuts Medicare by $500 billion. It's over $1 trillion in new spending. It does have the public option. So the House bill is a non-starter in the Senate.
Senator Lieberman also said on that if it came to filibustering to keep that bill from passing in the Senate, he'd join in that. Would you also be planning to do that if it looks like the public option thing's going to pass?
And let me tell you why Joe feels that way, and I do. I think the public option will destroy private health care. Nobody in this country in the insurance business can compete with a government-sponsored plan where the government writes the benefits and politicians will never raise the premiums. It will be a death blow to private choice. And all of these bills depend on reducing Medicare $400 to $500 billion over 10 years. Seniors are not going to like that. That's unnecessary. So I just think the construct out of the House and what exists in the Senate is not going to pass, and I hope and pray it doesn't, because it'd be a disaster for the economy and health care.
All right. Well, we're going to shift now to the situation and this awful thing that happened down at Fort Hood. Congressman Skelton, you're chairman of the Armed Services Committee. I've got to ask you, here we have a man who was trying to get out of the Army, who had ranted about the U.S. war on terrorism, whose contemporaries had reported him to their superiors as what is going on here. And yet somehow he winds up being the doctor that's sent down to Fort Hood to counsel our soldiers going to Iraq and Afghanistan and coming back. Who dropped the ball here?
Well, it's very difficult to say. We had a briefing 2 days ago by the Army, and they went through all that they knew at the time. And they did say to us that they are investigating it. As you know, the Army has its investigators. The FBI is investigating. And Bob, the truth will out.
But shouldn't someone have caught this, Congressman?
That could very well be true. But let's wait until the investigation is over. If that is the case, that'll be front and center. But right now, let's give them a few days to find out just where the ball was dropped, if that's the case.
Do you plan to investigate?
I'm going to wait and see what they do. If they are not thorough, we will, of course, have additional hearings, briefings on this. It's a tragedy of the first order. It's a tragedy not just for the soldiers and their families that were there. It's a tragedy for all of the families that wear the uniform. You see, it was not just a fellow soldier that did this. It was a fellow soldier whose job it was to help people. And I can imagine how traumatized the average military family must be.
Well, I don't think there's any question about that. Let me go to the senators now. Senator Lieberman, I mean, this broadcast seems to be talking a lot about Senator Lieberman and what he thinks about things, but he said this morning on Fox there should have been a zero tolerance for the kinds of things that were being said. And as chairman of the Homeland Security Committee, he says he is going to open an investigation. Do you think that's the right way to go, Senator Reed?
Well, I think we do have to look closely at what the Army has done, what the whole armed services has done, but Chairman Skelton, to put it in the right context, we have to wait for their careful deliberations. There's a criminal investigation going on. But we have to look at the broader issues, not just this incident, but are we taking adequate care of these soldiers? Are we providing the adequate support systems for their families? Are we also have appropriate command responsibilities for all of our soldiers, including our medical personnel? And these are issues that go beyond this incident and responsible for the Congress to look at them.
It brings to the top of the table the issue of the post-traumatic system disorder. And we in our committee, we in Congress, have addressed this now for 3 years. In the bill we just passed, it increases the mental health providers. It also requires additional research into this. But that is being dragged to the front and center because of this incident.
Well, let me go now to Senator Graham. Senator Graham, I think all of that is true, but after all, this doctor had not gone to Afghanistan. I mean, he hadn't gone to Iraq. He was fighting to not go there. The question I have is, what happened here that this man, who had a very poor performance record at Walter Reed, was somehow shuttled off down to Fort Hood, and he winds up being the one talking to these soldiers? It's not clear to me how this could have happened, and clearly it should not have happened. Senator.
Well, Bob, I'll be on. Yes, sir. I'll be honest with you. I think, as Ike said, we're doing a lot. I'm on the personnel subcommittee to address post-traumatic syndrome, the Wounded Warrior program. We've thrown a lot of money. We've put more medical personnel on the front lines of evaluating people. But about this case, you know, it's easy to second guess, and I want to, you know, I'm not going to go down that road yet. I mean, does every soldier who shows discontent with the war and every soldier that has a bad performance report, what are we going to do with those folks? So at the end of the day, let's see what the evidence trail suggests here and not overreact, because we live in a free and open society. You can be in the military and disagree with policy. What did his co-workers say about his behavior? How strong were the warning signals? At the end of the day, maybe this is just about him. It's certainly not about his religion, Islam. It's not about the Army. It's not about the war. At the end of the day, I think it's going to be about him. And if we miss some signals, some clear signals, we got to fix that. And I trust the Army to want to fix it, because it means more to them than any politician, because it happened within their ranks.
Senator Graham, let me just kind of cut to the chase here. Do you think that the fact that this man was a Muslim, obviously he was either part of some terrorist plot, and I think most suggestions are that he wasn't. It's looking more and more like he was just sort of a religious nut. And you know, Islam doesn't have a majority, or the Christian religion has its full, you know, full helping of nuts too. But do you think the fact that he was a Muslim may have caused the military to kind of step back and be reluctant to challenge him on some of this stuff for fear that they'd be accused of discrimination or something like that?
I hope not. I hope that's not the case. But to those members of the United States military who are Muslims, thank you for protecting our nation. Thank you for standing up against people who are trying to hijack your religion. I hope that's not the case, Bob, but we need, his actions do not reflect on the Islamic Muslim faith any more than a burning cross by the Ku.
I'm just suggesting that.
But some people are. Some people are, and I want to say as a United States Senator that I reject that. This man's actions reflect on him. And if we miss some signals about him that we should have known, great. But let's don't take this to a level that we should not. Let's don't accuse people of basically giving him a pass because he's a Muslim, because I don't think there's any evidence of that.
All right. Senator Reed, what's your thought on that?
Well, there are approximately 3,000 Americans, men and women of the Muslim faith, who are serving in the Army. They've been wounded. Some, I've been told, have been killed in action. Their record is one of service and dedication to the nation and selfless service. So I agree entirely with Senator Graham. This is not about theology. This is about doing your duty as a soldier. And also, I think we have to be careful not to leap beyond the current investigation. And I think, again, what we will find is that someone who has deep psychiatric problems, they're not unique to the Army. We've had terrible shootings in college campuses and office buildings, and those things are the result of, ultimately, of one person's psychological, psychiatric difficulty. The irony here is he was a psychiatrist. The irony here, he joined the Army as ROTC at Virginia Tech, came through the Army. He was not sort of just here as a transient.
Well, let me just interrupt you because I only get one final comment. The irony also is that why did he wind up there in that particular job? Do you think this is a sign that the military is simply overextended, Congressman Skelton?
The Army is strained. I've been saying that for some time. That's why we increased the size of the Army this year. But let me say this, Bob. We should not rush to judgment. I'm an old prosecuting attorney, and I know that it takes time to investigate. We have excellent Army investigators. We have the FBI, and they're as good as they come in investigating this whole issue. The truth will out. We will soon find out answers to the very questions that you're asking, and the chips will fall where they may. Right now, I think our sole concern should be those families, the military families, the Army families, and those that suffered injuries and death.
Well, gentlemen, I want to thank all of you for being here to talk about this morning. We'll be back in 1 minute to talk about the election. It now seems like it's about a year ago. It was just on Tuesday.